This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. The exodus from Beijing gained urgency today. The U.S. ambassador to China ordered families of U.S. officials evacuated after Chinese troops terrorized a diplomatic compound, spraying bullets into apartment buildings that house American and other foreign citizens. Witnesses said more Chinese were killed by gunfire on the streets of Beijing. Violence is also reported in half a dozen other Chinese cities. The political situation remains murky, obscure, but CBS News correspondent John Sheehan tells us the Army has tightened its grip on the blood-soaked streets of the capital. John?
Dan, soldiers in Beijing fired wildly into hotels and foreigners' homes today, and more Chinese civilians were gunned down in the street. The military siege of Beijing looks like it's just beginning. The 27th Army, camped at Tiananmen Square, got fresh troops and supplies today, and thousands of soldiers involved in the slaughter of unarmed protesters marched out. The troops continue to fire at civilians, however. Watch closely. A soldier on a truck waves as if to say, "Stop taking pictures." Then the message is reinforced with a burst of gunfire. In order to resupply, the 27th had to pass through the lines of the 38th Army that only yesterday appeared poised for an attack on the troops who carried out the massacre. The two forces had clearly struck a bargain. Tanks of the 27th withdrew altogether from a key intersection. But as the threat of imminent war between rival army units recedes, there is increasing combat between the military and the people. Nightly attacks with Molotov cocktails and firearms. That war is escalating. Continual wild gunplay has damaged many buildings. Troops sealed off and searched a diplomatic compound, saying that a soldier had been killed by a sniper. When soldiers marching out of Tiananmen reached the compound, they were chanting, "We love the people." Then they laid down a terrifying barrage of fire in the air and into diplomats' apartments, apparently in a trigger-happy attempt to discourage further sniping. U.S. Ambassador James Lilly is trying to find out who's in charge of the Chinese government. He can't get past lower-level officials. The embassy is coordinating the evacuation of U.S. diplomatic dependents and other Americans who want to join two planned charter flights. Beijing Airport is hopelessly overcrowded with foreigners trying to get on flights to anywhere, as long as it's out. Martial law has not worked. The danger now is that there could be more massacres as the new warlords of China try to impose their will. Dan?
Thank you, John Sheehan in Beijing. The Chinese government, as usual, is putting out little official information. But as Bob Simon reports, what the government does say bears no resemblance to anyone else's account of what's going on.
Masses of tanks and troops pulled out of Tiananmen Square today, only to return a short while later. What did the maneuver accomplish? Resupply, perhaps, and the creation of a photo opportunity. China's nationwide TV news program opened this evening with these pictures of a few Chinese journalists invited by the authorities to survey an empty and peaceful square. It had been as sanitized as the party's version of events. While Western accounts spoke of fatalities reaching into the thousands, tonight's Chinese commentators said when troops recaptured the square, not one person died. If China's leaders made history last weekend, today they were rewriting it. The cameras visited wounded soldiers in hospitals. No civilian casualties made air. They broadcast dramatic footage and told the story of how an enraged mob had turned on a people's army which had been acting with admirable restraint. They showed the world's largest square back under communist control. What had been a pro-democracy movement was now branded counter-revolutionary and relegated to the trash heap of history. That's the official version now. It will not play well in Beijing, but many Chinese here are afraid it will play a lot better in the countryside, where people crave a coherent account of events and still have some faith in the party. The party has a monopoly on truth, according to communist doctrine, and this is the square where nobody died. Bob Simon, CBS News, Beijing.
Following several other governments that sent in planes earlier this week, the United States announced today it is now chartering aircraft to take Americans out of China. As Bill Plant reports, the Bush administration acted while under increasing criticism for its low-key approach.
As Americans converged on the Beijing airport to escape the deteriorating situation in China, the U.S. government came under sharp criticism for being slow to react. Today, the State Department took action to help U.S. citizens get out of China.
The United States government is arranging charters that will supplement U.S. airlines to facilitate the departure of all those who want to leave and all those who have been ordered to leave.
The only U.S. citizens ordered to leave are dependents of government employees. The government has no legal authority to order American civilians out of China, but is strongly urging them to go. 3 commercial aircraft chartered by the U.S. government will depart Beijing sometime in the next 12 hours. But Americans who've been trying to get out for the past 4 days wish that help had come sooner.
They waited too long. I mean, it's a mess over here trying to get out now.
And returning Americans had few kind words for the U.S. Embassy.
Every other country's embassy was there picking up their students, and they said to call them if there was trouble. By then it would be obviously too late.
I think the American embassy in Beijing is a disaster. They've done absolutely nothing for the overwhelming majority of people who are there, whose lives are at risk. They're useless.
One U.S. senator who's been frustrated trying to get his constituents out of China had this advice for the State Department.
Be prepared. Do a better job of it next time, and for goodness sake, complete this one quickly and get our people out of there.
But the confusion continues. According to officials here, not only does the U.S. government not have a clue which members of the hardline faction are actually in charge in China or what's likely to happen next, but also that the State Department has no record of which Americans have already left, and that it can only guess how many U.S. citizens remain in China. Bill Plant, CBS News, the State Department.
President Bush has refused to pull the U.S. ambassador out of Beijing, saying the U.S. government badly needs that contact with the Chinese leadership. Today, reportedly, there was high-level contact between the U.S. ambassador and some Chinese officials. Leslie Stahl has the latest from the White House on that. Leslie?
Dan, although there is still great uncertainty as to who is running China, top officials remain out of sight. U.S. analysts here are now assuming that Deng Xiaoping and the other hardliners do have the upper hand and are making the important government decisions. One reason for that assessment is what you just said, a meeting that our U.S. ambassador had with their vice foreign minister, someone officials here say is in the clear line of command. Lilly vigorously protested those shootings at the American compound and was assured that there is no deliberate move to harm Americans. Other evidence the hardliners have consolidated power. Premier Li Peng mentioned on state-controlled radio for the first time since the violence he was attending a ceremonial function. The government has formally condemned President Bush's action in suspending military sales and in granting asylum to that dissident, Fang Lijie, in the American embassy. White House spokesman say President Bush is certain that the steps he took were the right ones. Dan, no one here is saying that the hardliners have definitely won. President Bush, based on his own experience in China, is telling aides that the more you learn about China, the more you realize you don't understand, and that's because the Chinese want it that way. Dan?
Leslie Stahl, thank you. One early casualty of the China crackdown is trade with the United States. Dollars have been flowing into China under liberalized investment rules in the last few years, but now, as business correspondent Ray Brady reports, the tide is turning.
Every day now they come pouring off the planes from China. American students, tourists, and U.S. businessmen.
People were using live ammunition, and after consultation with several members of the business community, the American Embassy, and so on, I decided it was time to leave.
U.S. companies like Corning Glass, Nike, and Chrysler have invested around $3.5 billion to tap into a massive market, a fifth of the world's population, an investment that now seems shaky.
What normally took us hours now takes us days to move goods just a few miles.
If you cannot get any merchandise, you cannot get the piece goods out of the country, then you haven't got a business.
But American consumers depend on China for nearly $9.5 billion a year worth of goods. Most of them consumer goods, like toys, $1.1 billion a year worth. including such bestsellers as Micro Machines and lots of Barbie dolls.
If there are problems there and the companies can't get the products out of the country, then we could possibly see some kind of shortage for particular toys in the United States.
Every year, these hard-working Chinese sewing machines turn out a total of nearly $2 billion worth of men's, women's, and knit clothing, along with footwear like Nike running shoes. Manufacturers could move those machines to more peaceful countries.
If we don't get enough goods in here, then the price will go up.
Consumers aren't the only Americans who could lose out if China doesn't settle down. At this Chicago laser company, workers' paychecks come at least partly from sales to China. Another potential loser, the American farmer. The U.S. Wheat Association built China's first bakery for sliced bread. Object, to stimulate sales of wheat to China. Just this week, the Chinese wrote out a huge order. But continuing turmoil could slice off what had been a growing market. U.S. executives say China modernized its business rules in 1985, and that brought in a flood of investment that was helping move the country forward. But without more of that investment, they say, China will soon start slipping backward. Dan?
Ray, thanks. Still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News, Bill Whitaker on the common man and Beijing's new heroes. And Bob Schieffer on President Bush, a low blow, and apologies to the new head man of the House. Top Republicans from President Bush on down scrambled today to disown, denounce, and distance themselves from a Republican National Committee memo attacking new Speaker of the House Thomas Foley. After making sure the memo got out, the communications director of the Republican National Committee took responsibility for writing it, said higher-ups had no part in it, and then resigned. Chief Washington correspondent Bob Schieffer reports the latest from the ethics war front in Washington.
What Democrats called an attempt to smear the new Speaker Thomas Foley with innuendo forced the resignation today of Mark Gooden, an official of the Republican National Committee. Gooden authored the memo released yesterday, which termed Foley out of the liberal closet and compared his voting record to that of Massachusetts' openly homosexual Congressman Barney Frank. Today, embarrassed Republicans admitted the rough stuff that's become so routine lately finally went too far.
And it was stupid, it was juvenile. Nobody in our leadership, nobody in any responsible position in the Republican Party agreed with it, and he's gone.
This was a reprehensible act, something we disassociate ourselves from.
This is not politics. This is garbage.
Republican Party Chairman Lee Atwater apologized to Foley, but said the memo was not his doing.
This way, I will be spending more time personally viewing what goes out than I have, obviously, I had in the past. Had I seen this, I feel very confident that it wouldn't have gone out.
The president, who met with Foley today, said he too was disgusted with the memo, but Foley himself seemed ready to move on to other things.
I think the issue is closed.
Other Democrats were enraged and said the president must ultimately shoulder the blame himself. They saw it all as part of a pattern begun during the presidential campaign, when they said the president took the high road while others did the dirty work.
It's good cop, bad cop routine, where you have two heads, one saying let's compromise and let's work together, and the other putting out the most vicious kind of stuff, goes beyond what's known as political dialogue.
As far as the Democrats are concerned, the bad cop all along has been the Republican Party Chairman Lee Atwater, the president's old campaign manager. Tonight, his Democratic counterpart, Ron Brown, said Atwater ought to resign too. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
The first two defendants convicted by a jury in the slow-going investigation of U.S. defense contract fraud inside and outside the Pentagon were sentenced today. Teledyne Electronics Vice Presidents George Cobb and Eugene Sullivan will serve 6 months each in a halfway house. They will also be permitted to continue in defense contract work. Cobb could have received up to 40 years in prison and fined $2 million. Sullivan faced possibly up to 20 years and a $1 million fine. Another jolt to the nation's nuclear power plant industry today. California's Rancho Seco nuclear power plant is preparing for shutdown. The first time a working reactor complex has been voted out of business at the polls. 53% of those turning out for yesterday's balloting voted for shutdown. Rancho Seco board members said they would abide by the public's wishes.
You've just been caught knocking off the Kellogg's Cracklin' Oat Bran. How do you handle the consequences?
Did you eat all the Cracklin' Oat Bran?
Who, me?
Did you eat all the Cracklin' Oat Bran? Did you eat all the Cracklin' Oat Bran?
I didn't do it. I did not do it. No, absolutely not.
With the crunchy sweet taste of Kellogg's Cracklin' Oat Bran, an open box is an empty box.
This is one of 570 million refund locations for American Express traveler's checks. Now you can get a refund virtually anywhere there's a phone. Only from American Express traveler's checks. So if your bank doesn't carry them, go to one that does.
Shopping can make you feel terrific when you find fabulous color, fit, and style. But when you also find the Made in the USA label, you feel even better. It's a great feeling.
Made in the USA.
Now, Red Lobster's new 5-star shrimp sampler. 5 kinds of shrimp on one plate, just $8.95.
More for you, David Freeman.
Savory grilled shrimp, scrumptious scampi, Cajun popcorn, and more. 5 kinds for just $8.95.
More for you, Stacy Class.
A kid's meal, $1.95. Hurry.
Red Lobster, there's more for you to love.
Friday through Sunday, it's our weekend special. Steak and shrimp, just $10.95.
It is well established that AIDS is generally transmitted by sexual contact or shared needles. But how children contract this deadly disease poses a lot of problems for doctors. CBS News medical correspondent Susan Spencer reports from the International AIDS Conference in Montreal.
Used to it. Since he was born, he's had AIDS, one of 1,500 pediatric cases in the U.S. so far.
Well, unfortunately, I see a calamity in front of us. And we have very little support from many agencies.
Yet AIDS in children is growing fast, with projections of up to 20,000 cases in the United States by 1991.
Many aspects of this small but tragic corner of the AIDS problem baffle doctors. The mothers of most of these children are drug addicts who pass AIDS on to their babies, but not all their babies. Only about a third get AIDS.
If you take the same mother, she can give birth once to a child that's infected, and the following pregnancy may end with a child that's uninfected.
Further complicating things, at birth, there is no way to know if a child is sick.
In fact, there are no discriminating features. If you showed me 2 babies, one in fact infected and one not, I certainly couldn't tell the 2 apart using any tests that I have.
So doctors treat them all with what treatment there is. AZT is being tried, but it's toxic, raising questions about giving it to a child who may not even be ill.
If you're dealing with an infant, a newborn, we're worried about what will happen 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the line.
Danny takes drugs to boost his immune system, a treatment that's had some success. His grandmother brings him to the hospital, takes care of him, but many kids with AIDS have no one who cares.
They may still be drug users, and their priority may be where they're going to get their drugs that day. So that AIDS is not up there.
On every level, children pose one of the most difficult problems in AIDS, with sadly, no dramatic new answers yet. Susan Spencer, CBS News, Montreal.
In South America, at least 160 people were killed today when an airliner crashed in Suriname. The Suriname Airways DC-8 was trying to land in dense fog at an airport with no radar. About a dozen people survived the crash and were hospitalized with injuries. Among the dead were at least 2 American crew members.
The finer things. Happily, some are affordable, like Grey Poupon Dijon mustard. Grey Poupon has the classic quality of the original French Dijon recipe created centuries ago. A distinctively delicious taste for meats, salad dressings, and sauces. So enjoy one of life's finer pleasures.
Pardon, monsieur, est-ce que vous avez du Grey Poupon?
Mais bien sûr. Grey Poupon, one of life's finer pleasures.
95,000 miles and no problems.
Because Quaker State exceeds every single car maker's U.S. requirements for maximum engine protection.
The big Q stands for quality. Always has, always will.
When summer wear needs special care, trust Woolite in your machine. From sunning wear to stunning wear, whatever clothes need special care, trust in your machine.
Of course I killed them. I thought about hiring somebody to kill them for me, but those guys can be really expensive. Believe me, it's easier than you think. I just aimed, shot, and killed those little creeps myself.
New Black Flag ant and roach killer kills faster than ever with its exterminator-proven ingredient.
Their kind deserve to die.
New, faster-killing Black Flag.
In Florida this week, 2 tragedies involving children, and out of them, a warning for families across the land. Juan Vasquez reports.
For school children, summer is the season of fun. But police say that for households with handguns, summer is the season of danger.
Children are very curious at that age, and they like to play with guns. They think it's a plaything, which of course it's not. A gun will kill.
In Orlando, a 13-year-old was teaching a friend how to unload a .357 Magnum. The gun went off, and 10-year-old Scott Feltner died of a bullet wound to the head. In Miramar, near Fort Lauderdale, a hysterical 10-year-old boy called an emergency number to say he had shot his sister.
My name is Sean Smith.
Okay, Sean, take a deep breath. Everyone's on their way. What happened?
I didn't know my dad's gun was loaded, and
okay,
and I shot her.
Okay,
I didn't mean to.
Okay, listen. Okay, who did you shoot, Sean?
My sister. I didn't mean to.
Okay, Sean, don't worry. Everything's okay. How old's your sister?
God, please.
But Sean's 8-year-old sister lay dying, shot through the chest.
Is she breathing?
She's going.
Okay, listen.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to get a paramedic. I have a paramedic up here with me.
Okay.
Okay, is there anybody else home with you?
No, I just got home from school.
The Center to Prevent Handgun Violence says 2/3 of the incidents occur when children are at home alone. That's why they're more likely to occur during the summer, when school is out. And there are more accidents in Florida and Texas. Experts say up to 300 kids are killed accidentally with handguns each year. And for every one killed, 10 are injured. Police are so concerned they have launched a public service campaign.
Help prevent these tragedies. If you must own a handgun, please never store it loaded. Always keep it under lock and key. Your children's lives may depend on it.
Police say the tragedy that killed 8-year-old Aaron Smith could have been prevented by the sort of precaution not enough parents take. Juan Vasquez, CBS News, Miramar, Florida.
Do you like Raisin Bran?
Yes, I do.
Well, this is new Total Raisin Bran.
Oh.
It tastes just as good as your Raisin Bran.
Really?
But it has 4 times the vitamin nutrition.
4 times?
Under the gun in Beijing, the students who survived the massacre have retreated to their campuses. But as Bill Whitaker reports tonight, they have not retreated into fear. One of the goals of their democracy movement, freedom of speech, survived the massacre as well.
They came to the wall at People's University today, as they have every day since the pro-democracy movement began. They come here to gather and share information, a precious commodity in Beijing today. The talk this day is of rival armies and government deception. The government says only hooligans and ruffians oppose it, he says. That's a lie. It's all the people, the common people. I support the students, says this worker. Everybody does. Tell the world. Tell the world. They've developed a taste for speaking freely, and not even the rain could dampen it. I'm not afraid to speak. Our leaders are corrupt. As troops mass on the outskirts, a deceptive calm settled over parts of the city. You could find children at play and shoppers at markets today. But on almost every corner, you'd also find people angry and defiant. TV says we welcomed martial law, this woman says. They're lying to the people. At Beijing University, the center of the pro-democracy movement, it was clear martial law had done little to quell the fervor. This man tells everyone what he saw in Tiananmen Square. Our heroes used to come from books, he says, but now we have real heroes in Tiananmen Square. That's why I'm here, to tell the truth about the people's heroes. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Beijing.
And that's tonight's CBS Evening News. Dan Rather. We continue our commitment to keep you informed of major developments in China. If and when anything happens during the evening, you will see and hear it on this CBS station. See you tomorrow. Good night.
Tomorrow on CBS This Morning, the latest from China as foreigners scramble to leave Beijing. Also, rock star Jackson Browne on CBS This Morning. This is CBS.
Remember, today we do have our